Weekly Download, a podcast about interesting games, industry news.
Brought to you by Big Games Machine.
Like the last time when we had an Xbox special for the entire time.
Yeah, just a Mario
minifigure.
What shade of red do you think they'll use for the arms? The Mario red print.
Blue, surely. What are you talking about for the arms?
Red? His arms are red.
Turn around. No, you're right. You're right. I'm wrong.
Yeah, he's got blue.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
I can check if you want, but I think we know the answer.
I'm getting everything wrong today. This is a bad sign.
You are getting everything wrong. But anyway, I don't know. I have no idea where this intro is going to start, but welcome to the weekly download. We're 5.5 minutes into recording the episode. We've just done the intro. We'll see.
And I haven't said a true thing the entire time.
No, you just keep lying.
With confidence.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, if you can't get it right, at least get it wrong but sound like you're right. Is that something we should be encouraging people to do? I don't know, maybe. But welcome back. I am joined again by Alex. You were away last week playing Resident Evil. I think we'll park the Resident Evil chat until the end.
Fair enough.
We'll have your little thoughts at the end, I think, when we have the rundown. I'm keen to get into today's episode. I am looking forward to today's episode because I think we've got some quite different topics. As you noted before we started, Alex, no Ubisoft today, no High Guard. We're looking at some really good stuff. There's a huge story which has come out around PEGI and PEGI's rating systems, especially in regards to loot boxes, which I think is something that I think I say this a lot, but I think this is something which will change a lot of stuff with these reclassifications.
Just in case people who don't live in Europe are fumbling around for PEGI, even though you probably will recognise it from Gamescom and thing, it's the European ESRB.
Yeah,
essentially, it's the rating.
So the rating system for games, which is having a lot of changes. So we're going to cover that as one of our big stories. We're also going to be looking at the cost of V-Bucks going up, why Epic is making that decision. Is there more to it than just corporate greed and other such things? I think there is. There's a lot of nuance there that we'll have a look at. And then finally, we're also going to be looking at a story about Sony, who secretly have been running a dynamic pricing experiment on the PlayStation Store since late last year. More details about that in a bit. But what we'll do, we'll break away now. We'll come back in a second. And when we do, we are going to take a look at this PEGI games rating story. Welcome back. I'm gonna cut in there as Alex is returning from his shelf of goodness, because he was just talking about his 7-Eleven loot box Gundam that he got. And our first story today is about loot boxes, because we're going to be looking at the news that PEGI, which, as Alex said in the introduction, that is the European games rating system. So how old should you be to play a game? PEGI will tell you. Well, the interesting news here is that PEGI is overhauling how it's rating games. So we're moving away now from just being about content. So, sex, violence, gore, all these kind of things. We're now seeing the introduction of consideration for mechanics and risks around those mechanics. So in brief, any game submitted to PEGI now that has paid loot boxes, or what we're calling paid random items, will now automatically receive a PEGI 16 at a minimum. Now, there's a few other nuances in there, but I think we'll lead with that as the context before we look at some other things. And Alex, I'll open up the floor to you.
I should have checked the exact wording on this, because a lot of the finer points of this, when we get into them and the other ratings, it's coming down to the descriptors. But for a long time, the PEGI rating has said online interactions are not covered by this kind of rating. And I think anything with an online mechanic automatically gets bumped into is it 7, 8? What's the one that sits between 3 and 12? I think it's 7.
Yeah.
So I think there are some, your online interactions have always kind of sat outside the rating. So it's interesting to see them really digging into that and looking at what, essentially, for the most part, live service mechanics and the different elements of that, how that impacts a lot of it. And I think I'll let you pick it up from there and get into some of the minutiae, because I think some of this is really, some of what I've seen of this seems really smart. And I think it's something that are probably going to be very helpful for people that aren't just too young to use it, but maybe also just want to opt out of some things.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we can look at some of the specifics. So I'm gonna read off my script here. So ignore my glazed eyes. I want to make sure I get this right. So PEGI 16, that rating will cover card packs. So what you see in like Ultimate Team game modes in things like EA Sports FC, gacha systems, and then keys for random crates. A lot of those games, which will get rebranded as 16 in this new system, previously sat in the PEGI 3 or 7 range, as you've said, Alex. PEGI 12, that will now be for games with paid battle passes or time-limited offers that expire. So that includes pressure to play mechanics. So you lose out if you don't log in, for example. So login streaks. And then the last one, PEGI 18, we're looking at social casino games. So, social casino games. We're looking at NFT-linked games where tokens are required to play and can be traded. I can't remember the last time I've seen NFT appear in anything. So perhaps a blast from the past. And then also unrestricted chat. So that'll be games that have got no moderation or reporting tools. I feel like that last one, I can't imagine there's many games nowadays that don't have systems in place.
Arc would, if you kind of stumble into somebody in the open world, you can click that. But if is it and moderate, like if they have open chat but they have moderation, I wonder if that's okay.
I think if there's a capacity to report and but no, that is a good example where you can have those interactions without being in a party in that closed network. I think my understanding is if that would probably not fall into 18 because there's things in place which is why I think most games will have systems like that. So I don't think the PEGI 18 stuff is too much of a change, but the 16 and 12 in particular is huge. And I think there's a few big points here. The first of which is, I think, how are sports games in particular going to deal with this idea that the idea that EA Sports FC, Madden, NBA 2K, all these games who have got these random pack mechanics within them, the idea that those games will now have a 16 rating, their market is, someone who was that age myself, their market is very heavily in the under 16 category. A lot of the people playing those games and investing money into it are under 16, and it's a similar thing with gacha games as well on the mobile side of things. So I think this feels, if it's implemented properly and companies can't find a way around it, this feels massive, because I think this will change how a lot of advertising works. And you're always going to get guilty as charged. I was playing Medal of Honor with my dad when I was 7 years old. So I think there's always some people who will ignore age ratings, right or wrong. But the wider point is that if these games are going to get recategorized, that will surely have a massive impact on how they can advertise and how they target consumers.
Yes. I mean, it's a difficult thing to know, because I think, I suspect parents aren't going to stop their kids buying EA FC, right? I think that's ultimately where that's going to come down to. Like, I wonder how much of the scope is there, but it is good to have it marked out and have those descriptors on the back of people. I mean, I've worked in game stores, and honestly, when I thought of this, I was like, oh, great. So now you're going to have to be IDing 12-year-olds for all these games that otherwise you never thought of doing. Because that was always the challenge. Like, younger people are always trying to buy games that are outside their thing, and you've got to get their age group, and you've got to get that evidence, and that is going to be a bind if FIFA's like that. Not that there are many game stores out there anymore, of course.
Especially because I think it's harder to. My take on it is that I think this is being done because I think there's a recognition that if the games industry and the bodies within it don't regulate themselves, more governments are going to step in. We've seen the loot boxes, the gambling. There's a lot of stuff with Valve. The state of New York are suing Valve in relation to loot boxes and randomized mechanics. To come back to your point, I think the funny side of it to me is that it's very easy to justify to a parent why their child shouldn't play Call of Duty or Battlefield, because the age rating those games have is because of the content. Whereas if someone can recognize that a lot of these mechanics are inherently gambling to some degree, even if there's no real money coming out of it, there still is the element of gambling, but that's harder to present as being a threat, perhaps in comparison to Grand Theft Auto, which is very explicit about the content that it has and why it's age gated the way it is.
And it is fascinating to see the kind of way they've stratified it, and I think it's really quite smart. It's kind of like habit forming, but not doing anything. Ultimately, with the PEGI 12, which is season passes and battle passes, teaching you to do something habitually, but it's very upfront about what it's doing. It's non-manipulative in terms of, you know what you're getting. Next one is you don't know what you're getting. You're paying for stuff. It's essentially gambling, but it's not real money. So I can see where they're going in terms of how they're controlling that. The one thing that isn't kind of mentioned here is that one of the things in the article I read on this was that there could be things they implement to reduce that. So if FIFA were to put in an ability for a parent to lock a child out, like to essentially have an under 16 version that is opted into by the parent, then it could be rebalanced again on top of that. So there are definitely ways around this, which I think is really smart. And it was one of the things that I was alluding to earlier, is like there are people out there with impulse control problems that they fully acknowledge. Like there are people with, gambling issues, all sorts of different problems, who probably played FIFA for years and then had to stop because this was a problem for them.
Yeah, I mean,
having this ability,
I'll admit that I'm one of those people, because it is very.
So having that,
they hook you when you're young, and it's a very difficult thing to break out of. And it got to the point with me where I just had to stop buying the games because
exactly.
As a 12-year-old, I was getting sucked into a system which was very manipulative without even realizing.
And that's a feature of the game, as opposed to, and that is a mode of the game, not the game. But it was so in your face. So the ability just to turn that mode off and opt out and not see it and lose all of those other elements would be, I feel long overdue, actually, even beyond the age rating. I think for people that don't want to see it, don't want it opt in, I appreciate that that's probably not going to help a lot of companies' bottom lines. But I think just in terms of,
but then it might, because it's an ethical workaround, isn't it, to this? That does make sense. I think I'm keen for us to wrap because we've got lots to talk about today. But I think on the whole, this is a good thing. I think it's long overdue. I think that we're past the point, as we started this section with, these ratings in the past were about content. For years now, we've seen a lot of these mechanics run rampant. I think we are well past, from my opinion, I think we're well past the worst of the loot box phase. I feel like we've kind of, the industry's matured past that to a degree, but I still think there's enough of it that this makes sense. And I think even when we do go down to look at the PEGI 12 rating and with the battle passes and especially the limited time stuff, login streaks, that's something that is very manipulative. And I know we've both been victim of games that do that as well. Yeah,
and I think that that's the one that leapt out to me as kind of I hadn't even considered how unhealthy that was.
And
that's
they'll be coming for Duolingo next. The Duolingo is going to get a 12 PEGI.
Yeah.
PEGI 12.
I think it's I really think it's really smart as something to limit how this is used and how it functions. And I do wonder how obviously we can see exactly where Fortnite fits into all this, but I'm not sure where Roblox is going to fit into it, given some of these ratings as well, which could be interesting.
Well, we'll have to. My favourite phrase, isn't it? We'll have to keep an eye on this. But I think that I think this is planned to be introduced in June,
You could
June 2026.
keep a peg eye
So
on this.
yeah, well done. And on that brilliant pun, we'll break away and come back in a second when everyone's calmed down from the laughter at that fantastic pun. And we are back with our second story of the day. No more loot boxes, but we are still talking about money and pricing. And reports have surfaced this week that Sony has been quietly running some sneaky A/B testing for its prices on the PlayStation Store since the end of last year. Seeing estimates that there's about 150 games being involved in this across 68 territories, notably, and I believe because there's slightly different consumer laws, the US and Japan are both excluded from this experiment. Users are reporting that they're seeing discounts on the same games that range from 5 to 18% in terms of, so one person might see 35% off, one other person might see 30. And we've got games from Sony, 2K, Bethesda, Ubisoft. Essentially, this algorithm looks at your purchase history and what you've played and how quick you are to take advantage of sales or not, and then decides what price you're willing to pay. So that's the context. As I always do, Alex, I open up the floor. What have you got? What are your thoughts on this?
It's absolutely wild. Like, there is, obviously it's something that we see. It's becoming more possible to do surge pricing. I know there are reports on like stores in America. There was a whole blow up around Black Friday and them all having like digital pricing rather than having like tags so they could change dynamically with any moment.
Lidl style. They do that at Lidl,
Lidl
but I've not
style.
seen Lidl do any dynamic shenanigans.
And obviously there are a lot of things that do price dynamically, but for the most part, the reason for that dynamic pricing, especially with something like Uber, is to meet demand. And, arguably there are some things, demand is lower. If you pay, you have to pay more to get the service at that time. And, there are arguably times that if you're running out of turkeys around Christmas, for example, it makes sense for people to make, I guess, a bit more money when the demand goes up, because Lord knows nobody wants to eat a turkey in March. So get your money while you can.
Do we want to eat them at Christmas? It's not even.
Well, that's
not even a good. It's not even a good meat.
But when it comes to
when
it comes to the idea that you're being surge price, essentially, it's not surge pricing. That is different. But on something digital that's always there, that doesn't go off, that doesn't have an issue of
infinite
infinite supply, then what are we doing? If you want to sell your game for less money, so you game for less money, don't spike it for one person.
My first thought, and it's what I've got down in today's script, was it feels like Ticketmaster. It feels like this evolution towards there might be a recommended retail price, but if you're, and it's why for me, I as long as it's possible, I will never have a digital only system not because of this necessarily, but because of the possibility of things like this. Are digital storefronts now going to evolve into this kind of system where what you pay and what someone else pays is different because of your habits? It almost feels like, and I hate using these words, but it feels like Sony is rewarding more casual players and punishing the more, not loyal, but the people who do invest more into games, who do buy. I'm looking and I'm thinking, as someone who really likes a lot of Sony's big tentpole third-person narrative games, I tend to pick up a lot of those games very quickly after they come out. Am I going to get worse sales because of that habit? Yeah.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, it feels like that. And I think, well, if Sony do this, I'd expect Microsoft to do it. I'd expect Nintendo to do it. I'd expect Valve to do it.
Sales?
We offered you, well, they've got their Mario sale at the moment, and you can get 33% off Super Mario Odyssey. You could get 33% off Super Mario Odyssey 7 years ago. So maybe with Nintendo, it would be like, well, you're a very casual player. We've offered you 35% off Super Mario Odyssey. Dive in.
Absolutely.
But you get the point that I'm making.
Absolutely.
It feels like it could happen elsewhere if there's not enough of a backlash against this. And the consumers will decide if they want to do that or not, won't they?
And I don't, this isn't, I'm just checking, this isn't one of our stories today, but it does overlap because there's I think it's a class action lawsuit that they're trying to bring in the UK around the
with
monopoly
Sony
PlayStation has on the marketplace. And this isn't, I don't want to distract from this point, but like one of the points of that is that regularly you are paying 20 to 25% more for a digital copy. And the promise when we moved to digital, this is probably before you were playing games, it was always this promise that once we remove the distribution costs and the plastic and all these other
everything
things
will be so
required,
cheap.
everything will be
so
cheap. It'll all be like Steam. No, apparently it's so they can gouge the the loyal players. That's
the corporations lied. The corporations lied.
No,
no,
not again. Why do I fall for this every time? Says I with my discless PlayStation 5.
But that is the crux of it, isn't it? I think that I understand it from a business perspective. And hey, if they're doing this testing and it's working, the fact is that every other industry is doing the exact same thing. We brought up Ticketmaster. If you want to go and get tickets for something on Ticketmaster, it depends on, if no one wants them, they get cheaper. And if people do want them, they go up in price.
Limited. I do understand why things are differently priced at different times.
Alex, these digital games are limited.
Numbers.
It's very hard. It's very hard to store all these digital games in the cloud. It's very expensive.
I understood when shmups used to have, and when you have limited run physical editions, I understand why they're more expensive. You know, you've got a time in which you can, you know, they probably will have a limited, one of the companies is called limited run. But, you know, there will likely be a time that they stop making them, and there's a reason that they're there for a premium, especially for popular games. But I do not understand. I mean, I do understand why they're doing it with digital, but there is no excuse for them doing it, actually.
No, and I don't. We're coming to this story quite early. I cannot see this going away without a lot of quite widespread backlash towards it. This is something that it's not layoffs at studios. It's not journalists losing jobs to AI. This is something that affects everyone. If you've got a PlayStation, you know, if you've got a PS5 and you want to play games, it doesn't matter if you're only playing 2 games a year and you don't care about the rest of the industry. You can be affected by this. And that's why I can't. Well, yeah, actually, yeah. They're all for it. Yeah, my games are cheaper. It's brilliant. We took a small little break to try and see if we could find some, and we couldn't. But there's definite proof that this is happening. Okay, there's definite proof it is happening.
I do think the reason we can't is because at the moment the March sale's on, and that's going to, I think, during the March sale, because they want people to cover it and tweet and write about it. They want them all to be aligned.
Or they've realised everyone knows and gone, oh no, turn it off. Anyway. We tried, we failed to find some, but definitely if anyone's got any, you know, if anyone has anything about this, please do share it.
If anybody else wants to spend 10 minutes looking up games and seeing what the discount is online with us.
Get with a friend on you know, Discord, or I nearly said Skype then, not Skype. Skype's dead. Get on Discord with someone, have a little browse on the PlayStation store, see if you can spot some. But we know it's happening. There's proof it's happening. So to be serious for a second, before we move on to our last story, this is it. It is happening. It's, as you said, Alex, it's companies can do this now because they have the data. They know how long we're playing games for. They probably know what you buy and then don't play for 6 months, or what you buy, play for 10 minutes and then never touch again. They have this kind of data, so they can be very specific about what they offer.
And I've known and I've worked at companies where there is, you know, that they do use that to essentially funnel some players in some things towards, you know, bundles and certain price brackets of items, like purchasing changes what you see in the store. But the idea that for the base game, this is selecting different prices for you is something quite different, especially when, and I think, it isn't helped by the fact that you can also buy it in a store. Like, it's a physical, in that sense, it's a concrete thing. But oddly, the concrete things are the ones that you can imagine dynamic pricing for, because there are reasons to do it then. But on a digital format, I can't
There's no
reconcile
need.
it. I can't reconcile it as a
Neither can I.
model.
Well, on that note, we'll break and then come back with a story that maybe we can reconcile, maybe we can't. But we'll be back in a second, and then we'll be having a look at the V-Bucks price situation. And welcome back. Well, we're just going to leave that in. Our last story of today, as Alex levitates into the air, takes us to the battle bus, actually. Maybe you were on the battle bus while you were doing that. The battle bus from Fortnite. I'm not going to keep saying that word. And Epic Games, where Epic is now raising the price of V-Bucks to offset the increased operational costs. And there is a Lego?
The Lego Llama.
Lego Llama.
I feel like I've just derailed this already.
It's okay. We won't start talking about Lego.
It's the Fortnite Llama.
It's pretty cool. Did you have to pay with V-Bucks for that?
No, it was at the...
Well, that's
Epic
good,
thing.
because
At
V-Bucks
GDC.
are going up in price. GDC, very nice.
Yes.
So, starting from the 19th of March, so as we're recording, that will be next Thursday. Well, and next Thursday when you hear this tomorrow, or whenever you hear this. If you're hearing this after the 19th of March, it's already happened. So, unlucky. No cheap V-Bucks for you anymore. But Epic is increasing the price of V-Bucks and the cost of the real money packs to buy V-Bucks in Fortnite. Epic's official reasoning behind this is that, and I quote, this is from the article on this, so they need to help pay the bills despite reporting 6.2 billion in gross revenue last year. I will say, to not be facetious, I think what is a valid point here is that Fortnite is a powerhouse for revenue. That's true. No one can dispute that. But the developmental cost and the cost of IP, servers, licensing, compared with a few years ago, we have to appreciate the fact that Fortnite as a game now is inherently covered in licenses at every opportunity. So there is an increased cost to that, which I imagine is what's being referenced to here. But yeah, the long and short of it is that V-Bucks are seeing a small increase in price, as well as a few other adjustments, which we'll go into in a moment. Alex, I cede the floor.
It's not small. It's not
well,
small.
no,
It's 20%.
But yeah, that is quite a lot.
But yeah, I guess I hadn't considered. I mean, I guess what you're saying isn't that, they're not changing the price because they're changing price because they're not making as much money, not because they're losing money. And at some point, they probably have to be.
Well, potentially, I think that's the. I don't know if that's true, but I think that's me trying to be more balanced and understand the reasoning behind this, and I think that's what it is. It's not the game that it was in 2018 anymore. The cost. No, go for it. I mean, I'm on your side with whatever you're going to say, I feel, so.
But much like the last PlayStation story, these are all imagined things. Like, it's a strange move. Like, and I guess in some ways it's quite upfront, because what they could have just as easily done, and in some ways, I do wonder about the timing on this in terms of business, the revenue for the year, because I bet you they're going to see a spike in V-Bucks sales before day of the change, which is as we come into the end of the year amounts, because they could just put up the cost of everything by 20%. And in some ways, it's quite good, because if people bought it in the past, it's retaining its value. So if they're buying items with it, that's there. So in that sense, it's an interesting move.
I will say, I don't think it would be feasible to change the in-game cost of items. I feel like that would be a much bigger. I think that, but we do PR, don't we? I think it's interesting to look at it from that frame point, which is that this is hard to swallow, but hear me out. When you go to a different country that uses a different currency, you more easily spend money because you lose the understanding of how much you're spending. And I think it's the same with something like this. I think the change. So as an example, so $8.99 used to get you 1,000 V-Bucks. Under this new system, you'll get 800. So you're not spending more.
You
At the point of purchase.
No, absolutely.
But you're just getting less for your money, which feels easier to deal with than if you were spending more to get
what it's
the same.
Literally doing is increasing the value of each individual V-Buck before the change is made. So, which I think...
I feel like we're having like a maths lesson.
Yeah, I think the end result is, Pete, you are still paying more per item, and I don't know... It's a weird way of dealing with it, because what you're doing is increasing the value of your currency by 20%, rather than... I think there's something in the timing of this, and it's only dawned on me as we've had this discussion. I think part of this is to drive more V-Buck sales.
If they knew the change was going to happen, maybe they've brought it to this point for that very reason. I think that makes total sense.
I mean, here's a fun and semi-related story about Japan, because I love telling stories about Japan. They increased the tax rate on cigarettes, and the goal was, much like in the UK, to dissuade people from buying cigarettes by putting up the cost. And they thought they'd done it, because for the 2 months after, there were a drop in cigarette sales. What in fact happened was everybody went out and stocked up on cigarettes for 2 months worth of cigarettes. And actually, I think they stocked up for longer than that, because the people I knew smoked more cigarettes in the window after, because they had more cigarettes.
Then so 6 months down the line, they're like, oh, everyone's buying them again. We failed.
And that's another thing, right? Because it's going to mean you're going to have all these V-Bucks sat in your pocket that you bought in a hurry because you realized they were going to be worth more money afterwards. But once you've got them, you're going to spend them. So they're perhaps in a way, and going back to the first story, because it's all connected today. We didn't realize this when we started. Your habit forming, and once you're in the habit of buying them, you might be more likely to spend them and then buy them again, even if they are now worth less per V-Buck. Not to get all conspiratorial,
there is
I do think it's a weird way of dealing with it financially, is to increase the value per V-Buck.
I think something else which is interesting is the fact that so for anyone who's not played Fortnite, they have a battle pass system. That battle pass used to, well, as of now, it won't next week, but as of now, that costs 1,000 V-Bucks. So, and that's been the case since the beginning, I'm fairly sure. So you could go in, you could pay your $8.99, get the 1,000 V-Bucks, go straight in and buy the battle pass, and then you'd earn, I think, around 1,500 V-Bucks from that battle pass if you completed it. So not only you'd pay that flat, in theory, you'd pay that flat fee, God, that's a struggle, of $8.99, you'd get the battle pass once, and then if you didn't spend any of the V-Bucks you got from it, you could just keep buying the battle pass in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that last point is still going to be possible. So the battle pass will now cost 800 V-Bucks, so it still costs the same $8.99, but you're actually getting only 800 V-Bucks now for completing it, so you don't get those additional ones. So on the surface, the entry point for the battle pass system is still the same, and in theory, you can buy it once, and every time a new battle pass comes around, you can use those V-Bucks you've got from it on the next one. But now you don't have those extra ones. That's something that's being lost as well. So that's another case where we're seeing as you said, Alex, the value of this not real currency going up because the supply that you get through the game is being reduced. So there's a few, on the surface, what is quite a simple change is, I imagine, going to have quite a large impact on a lot of the player base, because I think there is probably a lot of people who will, in the past, have bought the occasional battle pass and used the V-Bucks from it to keep buying them going forward. And while that still is possible now, it's a much worse value proposition than it was.
Have the extra bucks for, which, I guess makes sense because people who bought it at the beginning and have used it year on year on year have gathered up all those little extra bits of V-Bucks, and essentially that's not free money, but you know what I mean. So I almost understand them wanting to put an end to that, but even more so when the value of a V-Buck has gone up. It is a strange way of dealing with it to me. I would have anticipated them putting the price up of everything. This feels a strange choice, by the way.
It is, but I not going to agree to disagree, but I do see the logic. Yeah, I see the logic to an extent. I think something to keep an eye out for is that Fortnite wasn't the first big live service game by any means, but I think it was one of the first ones to go out there with like the battle pass system. Fortnite's monetization system became the de facto monetization system for a lot of other games, and that includes the prices of those different entry points, of the different currency amounts. So as with the Sony story we've discussed, I do think that if this goes ahead and there's not enough backlash to cause issues, I do expect other live service games to adjust their economies to suit this, because I think they'll look and the decision makers will look and go, say in a year's time, well, it's not really had an impact on Epic negatively, so we can probably do the same thing and not boost our earnings, but we can adjust our costs in the same way to not lose out on that additional revenue. Potentially, that's just me speculating, but I think it would likely happen if there's no issues.
I'm looking at this now, and I think the most telling part of this is actually at the other end of the scale. It's at the microtransaction scale, because I'm looking at the numbers here. Sorry,
the doubling of cost.
They're doubling the cost of 50 V-Bucks, which means to buy the equivalent of 800, if you're going to do it in microtransactions, you're going to have to spend $16 now instead of the $9 value. Whereas previously, doing the same thing would cost you $10 to get to 1,000, which is a 10% saving if you buy the $900 pack.
And you can't get any smaller.
Yeah, but I
wonder it's 50, then it's 800. So you can, if you need to top up a few hundred to get a skin or to get a pickaxe or something, you don't really have any choice. And as you said, that's actually a massive increase.
I wonder how much of this is a determination that most of their sales and microtransactions top things up, and that's where they're sitting on this, because that's actually where I'd be most nervous, because if you're earning a few extra V-Bucks here and there from the battle pass, and like you're all happy over here, and then you realize, oh, I just want this. That
cost has doubled.
That's exactly. It's doubled for that smaller amount. So
and again of note, that's the only one as far as we know that is a real currency change rather than an adjustment of the in-game currency.
Yeah,
which makes it stand out even more.
Yeah, they haven't made that 40 V-Bucks for 59 cents. They've made it, as you say, they've doubled the cost.
Yeah, but interesting.
Which is not a 20%. It is 100% increase on the smallest end of this.
Yeah, I'd like to retract my comment at the start. God, it's only an extra 49 cents. Who doesn't have that spare?
Well, that's exactly the problem, right? And also likely there's probably minimum transactions somewhere, and there might be all sorts of things caught up in that anyway.
Yeah, I
think it's a bit odd.
We will wrap here. I think the last thing I'll say, and I don't want to start a new discussion with this, but I am aware something we've not touched on is that there's going to be like a cashback style scheme with this. So that's been introduced, where if you buy V-Bucks directly through Epic Games on wherever you play Fortnite, if you buy the V-Bucks directly through them as opposed to through a storefront, which is a much bigger issue that Epic have had in the past with transaction fees and such, you'll get 20%. Ironically, that's where the 20%'s gone. You'll get that 20% back as a cashback, essentially, as like a credit, which I don't want to start a whole nother discussion, but it is interesting that they've taken that 20% from one place and put it in another, and they've done it in a way to try and push people into their ecosystem. But it's something we've seen Epic contend with for a long time to try and capture more of those transactions, and this is their answer.
Seems to be.
I guess
that makes a lot more sense. That puts a lot of this in other context.
I'm going to say something to keep an eye on, but this change is set to take place on the 19th. I imagine that there'll probably be more stories around this in the coming weeks, so I think we will revisit this at some point. But for now, it's we've had conversations today around battle passes and microtransactions and other such things, and it shows it's still a very prevalent thing, and PEGI are on the money with these changes because it's such a big conversation. But we'll wrap there, and then when we come back, we're going to look at a few stories. We're going to look at Mega Man, and then we're also going to look at Sega. I was going to make a Sonic joke then, but then I was like something about blue flashes, or it's gone. I don't even think of Sonic when I think of Sega now, to be honest. Sorry, Sonic fans, but we'll be right back. And welcome back to this week's Rapid Rundown. Sometimes less rapid than other weeks, but we'll try and keep things as quick as possible. And our first story for this week is the news that Ben Diskin, who was the voice of Mega Man in Mega Man 11, so the most recent entry in the storied Mega Man franchise, will not be returning to his role in the new entry because of contract concerns, specifically because Capcom and Sega Afra are not seeing eye to eye at the moment. And
Did you
Diskin,
say Sega Afra or Sag Afra?
Sag Afra. It's just that's a tricky one to say. Sega Afra. That's the second story. But Diskin was told by Capcom that he would have to work without the protections of a union contract. He said no, so he won't be reprising the role.
This is an interesting one to me. We've seen voice actors get not rehired again and again, some of which kind of more famously, David Hayter in the Metal Gear as Snake, replaced by Keith Sutherland. You just sit and you look at it, it's like there is very little, there are very few people that have had their kind of performances are so locked in a lot of game franchises that they are untouchable. I think at this point, probably Nolan North and Troy Baker probably have some say on some of their larger roles, but for the most part, and Kratos, whose name I forget,
Chris Judge,
is that from SG1? Anyway. The point being, there are very few voice actors who command enough authority to hold on to their role, and I think most publishers are going to have, or developers are going to have their concerns around what comes up. But it is concerning if that is fully the issue. If it's all driven by the union element, then that is troubling, because obviously it means that the people that have even less power are going to have even less power in that scenario.
Yeah, well, again, I never want to dive too deep into these, but this is really interesting. I think what is of note to me was that, and I'm going to quote the article here because I want to make sure I'm getting this right. So Diskin said that he was told that there were full AI protections in place from Capcom, that his voice would never get used for AI, but he was unwilling to go ahead with things because of what you've said, which is that as a smaller scale actor, without the protection of the union, if something did happen, he wouldn't be in a position to be able to contest it or deal with it. And I think that's very valid. I know that SAG-AFTRA aren't perfect, and I know that there's been issues with them in the past about these do not work orders and other such things, but I think on a personal level, as an individual, it's a really valid point to make, and I think you have to stand for what you believe.
Absolutely. And I'm it's interesting that it's come out and become this bigger a deal. I think, and I'm not sure about this with SAG-AFTRA, but I know there are some unions where if you employ one person under a union contract, everybody in the recording.
Yeah, I think that is the case. So, that is the case.
Yeah, so it could be that in different circumstances, Capcom don't mind unions, but that they have these other people who aren't in the union. That's who they're using. he simply doesn't.
Yeah,
It's a lot
there
to
is two
change.
sides to it, isn't there?
Yeah,
I think
they've changed the voice actor for Chris, for Lee. This is the Resident Evil thing again, but like they've changed the voice actor for so many
not your time
characters
yet.
in that thing. I know, but
I'm joking.
when you look at things that are like where voice actors were like really kind of part of the performance, it doesn't matter. They've changed them. Like there's no love lost. And yes, you were right. It's Christopher Judge. Thank you for.
Boom. I'm happy with that. I just pulled that name out of nowhere.
Yeah,
but
well
okay.
done.
So Mega Man. We've looked at I don't know if Mega Man has like a nickname. The Blue something, surely the Blue Boy.
Rockman.
Rockman.
Is the Japanese name.
I'm going to call him Blue Boy because then I can relate it to another Blue Boy, Sonic and Sega. And Sega this week have come out and basically said that we've released loads of great games in the last 18 months. The critics love them, and it's not really done anything for our sales. So thanks a lot, I guess. Is the story from Sega, which is interesting. I mean, if we look at some of the games they have released, we've got, and I'm going to use Metacritic scores here, we've got Shinobi Art of Vengeance, 87, 2 Point Museum, 84, Teferi Fantasio, 94. So that's really in the upper echelon. That's the Persona team, of course. And then Sonic Racing Crossworlds, 82. So they've had critically successful games, but they've not met the sales expectations for these.
There are 2 games on that list that I'm absolutely committed to buying. I'm very keen to buy them. I just haven't had time. Possibly waiting for a sale. Possibly waiting for them on like different platforms is another thing. I mean, not with Shinobi, but with Refantasia. I think Metaphor. Yeah, like it's an interesting thing to say. Like those are. It's very rare that you could give me a list of 4 games and they'd be like, yeah, 2 of those are absolutely on my list, especially when they're so diverse as a set of games. But I think, it's tricky, like going in and jumping in. You've got one of them that's retro, one of them that's something completely new, essentially, and neither of them have either resonated or quite captured people's attention in the way they were hoping.
But I know I'm not.
Cash? I don't know.
I'm not going to argue with Sega here, but my understanding was that Metaphor Refantasio sold really well at launch. To me, it feels a bit similar to Ubisoft in that Ubisoft and Sega, I think, are in a position where people, unlike Nintendo, expect really quick sales on a lot of their games. In the case of Metaphor, that's from the Persona that's Persona developers making this game, and Persona games get rebranded and repackaged about 4 times a year at this rate. And I know that they said at launch that Metaphor would never get a golden edition or a complete edition in the way that those Persona games did. But I think in combination with the sales, there is a hesitancy to sometimes buy games when nowadays, and it's a problem across the board, you don't know what the game will look like in 6 months or a year, or so, you might not immediately get into this because a year down the line, it could be 75% off and it's a better version than the one that came out. So
I think what stopped me is that Metaphor is just a massive time sink, and it's had a few sales, but no absolutely huge ones. As I recall, it being on a couple of my wish lists. And really, I want it on something mobile because it's one of those games where I don't necessarily want to be tied to the... Well, exactly. I think I was waiting for the Switch 2 initially, and then...
I'd happily play it again on Switch 2, even though it is very long. But anyway, that's Sega. I think keep going, Sega. Come on. You can do it. You've got some great IP. We believe in you.
I'll buy it at some point. If it's just me that makes a difference.
Alex will buy it at some point. I think I bought Shinobi. I don't think I've played it, but I think I bought it.
No, I'm very keen to buy both Shinobi and...
is half the problem.
Ninja Gaiden, the 2 of those. A lot of those, I don't know if they're calling them D-makes or whatever, wherever they'd sit. I'm very much up for the...
Just good games. Bloody good games. On the topic of a good game that is also bloody, Alex, I'm going to give you, to finish today's episode, because you weren't here last week, a little treat. I'm going to give you a little bit of Resident Evil time. So go off.
This might be why I'm so swiffy. Like, I've played so much of it. I played through... I'm on my final run, probably, the Insanity
For now.
run. Yeah, for now. So it's my 5th attempt at the game. The insanity mode is a massive step up in terms of difficulty, like many difficulty jumps. I would say, like, I know you're not a fan of horror games. The story mode of it is, I mean, it's still horrifying, but it's not difficult. So, you know,
it's not the difficulty. You know, it's not the difficulty.
Yeah. But what I find fascinating about it is that they have brought together what you call the Winters games, which are 7 and 8, the kind of follow-ups that broke from the classic lore, and then all of the remake stuff and smushed them into a single game, because you've got Grace, who plays very much like Ethan did in 7 and 8. And then the Leon gameplay sits as kind of the 2, 3, 4 more action-heavy remakes, over-the-shoulder kind of action. At least by default, that's how they both play. And it's done a really good job of marrying those, making them feel like different play experiences, and for the most part, pacing them at a phase that, you know, it doesn't feel disjointed because at the beginning. It feels a bit disjointed because you jump between them so much, and there's a midpoint where you spend too much time with one of them. But for the most part, they do a good job making it feel like the tension, which is good, because much like you, actually, though I love a horror game, if I'm playing the horror elements for too long, then it gets too oppressive and I'll drop off and I'll not continue. Whereas there's this kind of catharsis of like, okay, lock and load, Leon, here we go. And
well,
like,
even like that's I think that's biological as well, isn't it? You can't be in that heightened state for too long because it becomes less effective. You need the break to, as I understand it, to go and have those more actiony and, you know, blow things up and those elements, to then when you come back to the creepy horror, it is more effective because you've not calmed down necessarily, but you've focused on something else, and then you can come in and be spooked again. I have no desire to be spooked. My only part of this fight is that I've been looking at the sales data, and I'm really surprised by how, I think Steam is the biggest platform, PlayStation's obviously next, Xbox is last. But the Switch 2 numbers, apparently PlayStation, as of earlier in this week, the end of last week, PlayStation was about 1.6 million. But the estimates for the Switch 2 put it about 900,000 to 1 million, which I'm really surprised by. But I think it's great to see that a great port of a game, or not a port because it's coming out on day one, but a great release of a franchise like Resident Evil is Capcom are being rewarded by the player base on Switch. And, you know, I think it's, you know, my thoughts on this. I love the fact that Resident Evil is a legacy series that continues to do numbers. I think that's important. It's good to see the tentpole franchises that we grew up with. I didn't grow up with them. As you know, the only one I've played is Resident Evil Mercenaries, which I know you hate me for.
I was 16
still growing
when the first one came out. I'm not sure if that's growing.
Still growing.
True.
But yeah, it's great to see it doing well numbers wise. It's great to see the critical opinion there. And as a Nintendo fan, too much at times, but as a big Nintendo person, it's great to see the Switch 2 version doing so well.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a fantastic game. I have plenty of other thoughts, but it really does do a great job of marrying up the nostalgia of the early games, the gameplay of the two. I sit here and remain kind of bemused as to what happens with the kind of that Ethan trilogy in there, and they tie things through it all. I would say, strangely though, it would be an odd jumping on point if you're out there thinking like, is this going to be my first Resident Evil?
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
I guess that's why the good thing about them doing the package, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like
well,
getting
even
7
that's
and 8.
an odd package because you want to play 2. I think 2's kind of vital to get
Play 2.
most.
But they've remade them all, so you can hop in wherever you want.
Oh yeah.
But on that note, I'm going to wrestle back the talking stick. We've given Alex his Resident Evil time.
There you go.
And I think that's where we'll wrap for today. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to listen to our thoughts, our analysis, our opinions on the biggest stories that shape the industry every week. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, I hope you have. Please subscribe. Whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts, be sure to subscribe. We publish episodes every Friday, so you get all the biggest stories of the week in this little conversation.
As long as they
If
happen
you're
before
more,
Thursday.
yeah, as long as they happen before Thursday afternoon. But you're in luck if you want the stories for the whole week, because not only do we have this podcast, we also have the weekly download newsletter, which is available via the Big Games Machine LinkedIn. You'll get that on Friday, so that does have Friday morning stories in. We also have the daily download, which is, as you can guess, daily, Monday to Friday, 5 days a week into your inbox. That's the biggest stories of the day, notable news, a list of all the upcoming events, and a few more fun stories as well. And you get that every day. You just got to subscribe via the link in the description. And other than that, I'm newsed out. I think we've spoken too much about the news today, so I'm gonna go away, decompress, and get ready to work on tomorrow's newsletter. But thank you so
Yes.
much for listening, Alex. It's nice to have you back. Megan was
Nice to be
a
back.
valiant replacement for you last week, but we've
Valid replacement.
not
Valiant
a
replacement.
valid replacement. But no, it's been good to have our tennis style back and forth. So thank you, and we'll see you all and hear you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye.